Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll give it a couple more minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started here. All right, I'll just give it one more minute here, and then I'll let Elizabeth start us out.
All right, I think we are ready to get started. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to be reviewing both the NetSuite and QuickBooks Online integrations. Katie will be leading us as our implementation manager, and we also have Chris, our product manager, on here to help answer any questions. So for today, we're just going to go through those items and then there we go. And just as a quick reminder, we do have a couple series of webinars coming up about our integrations. The next one coming up, it's going to be about Benchling and SciSpot. And then finally on the 24th, we have some custom development. So we're super excited to have you here today. I'm going to hand it off. There we go. We have a nice agenda in front of us, which Kate will bring you through. We've got a product overview. We'll quickly review the QuickBooks Online overview, the NetSuite overview, and then we'll go into the implementations of each of those, and then finally a resource center where you guys can get all the resources you need to start this implementation. So again, thank you for joining, and I will hand it over to Katie.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Thank you again all for joining today. As we go through the webinar, if you have any questions, just throw them in that Q&A box. And we'll stop at the very end to answer those questions out loud. So first of all, what do these integrations do? So we have an integration with NetSuite and QuickBooks Online. Both of these integrations will save your lab manager a lot of time by eliminating that manual data entry, such as creating those requests and everything in Quartzy, and then having to create the same information and enter that in NetSuite or QuickBooks. And then it bridges the gap between science and finance. So you can review everything in one place, and your accounting team or your finance team is on the same page as your lab. So what they do is basically allow you to create purchase orders in Quartzy, and then easily sync those purchase orders along with all of the important information for those orders to your NetSuite or QuickBooks Online account. And so next up, we'll go through demos of each of these integrations.
So to get started, I'm on the request module here, and I want to take these two Sigma Aldrich requests, group them into a purchase order, and sync it into QuickBooks Online. So to do that, I'll select them with the checkboxes here, and then click Group into PO. So that opens up this purchase order details page. And from here, you'll notice a couple of things. There's these fields called class and customer. These are optional fields that I have enabled in my QuickBooks Online account. So here's an example of a previous purchase order. You can see that I have customer and class on here. If you have not enabled these in your QuickBooks Online account, they won't show up in Quartzy. But in this case, you'd say I want to label these as a specific project. That's what I'm using class for. And then a hypothetical customer list for my test account here. So you fill out these values before you sync the purchase order, and they will automatically be populated in QuickBooks Online. The other field that's important to note here is called QuickBooks Vendor. So you'll note that this is how the vendor was represented on Quartzy, Sigma-Aldrich. However, when this vendor was created in QuickBooks Online, for whatever reason, the hyphen was not included. So to address cases like this, we show you your QuickBooks vendor list because we don't want to accidentally create a new vendor or have some mismatched records. So it's important that you have your vendor selected as part of this process. So now, before you sync it, it's important to make sure that your item names and everything is correct. I've got the class and customer filled out, quantity and price is good to go. And so the only last thing that I'm going to need to do is potentially add a purchase order number here. And so there's two ways to do this. If you leave it blank, QuickBooks will return the next purchase order number in the incrementing list. So the last PO I made was 11140. If I leave it blank, this will automatically create PO 11141. You also have the option where sometimes somebody might say, I have this label where I like to say that all my Sigma-Aldrich POs start with SA, and then we put in today's date, and then an incrementer to make sure that it is always unique. So this is saying this is my first PO of today for Sigma-Aldrich. If you have a pattern like this, you can type it in yourself, and then when I hit sync, it will automatically use this number in QuickBooks Online. But for this case, I'm just going to leave it blank. So now I'm ready to go. I click sync, and then the next thing we'll see is that it'll populate in QuickBooks Online. Here we go. You'll see a purchase order was saved successfully. It created it as 11141, and we'll go in QuickBooks, check it out real quick. Here we go. You see 11141 for Sigma-Aldrich. And a couple things to note, all of these details should be filled in based on your settings. Right now, Sigma-Aldrich is empty for me in my test account. You'll also see here that I have the use Quartzy's template option enabled. So this is where you see a vendor code and then the catalog number to make sure that this always comes across as a unique item. And then this is using the item name pulled from Quartzy, and then it pre-fills all of this information for you. So the ideal scenario here is the lab manager can go ahead, group things into a purchase order, create it from this screen, and then turn around and check out at the vendor's website using this purchase order number without ever having to go into QuickBooks Online. A couple of things I want to point out. These were new items that were created. These are using the job materials, I believe, setting that I had selected. So that's what the default expense account is used, that when this item was created, it will always use job materials per my settings. And then the other example I wanted to show you is if you, instead of selecting the templated option, you could select a default item instead. And so this is what happened here is I previously made a PO and had the setting that QuickBooks has never seen these 4 items. And rather than creating 4 different items, it just uses the fallback lab supply product. Each item on the PO ends up having different names or descriptions, as QuickBooks calls it. But these, if you go into your product and service list on QuickBooks Online, there will only be a single item here called lab supply. So that's the difference between those settings. At this point, the PO has been created. You go ahead and click Save Changes, and that's the end of the flow from the Quartzy perspective. This PO can then be used to check out with whichever vendor. If you ever need to get back to it, the PO number is here in the table. You can click it and it'll load it again so you can get the view of the current status.
All right. So that was an overview of our QuickBooks Online integration and how to sync those POs and what that looks like from Quartzy, as well as how it looks in QuickBooks once that PO is synced.
So
And just again, just an example of syncing this PO, the PO number being created. And that PO in QuickBooks. All right, and then we'll start with our NetSuite demo, and this will also go over syncing the PO from Quartzy to NetSuite.
This is a brief walkthrough of the Quartzy NetSuite purchase order integration. The way the integration works is it takes individual requests from your lab managers and from your scientists, and it bundles them onto a purchase order that is automatically created in NetSuite. So the way it works is I'm in the approved tab for my lab, and that's because I use the approval flow in my Quartzy lab. However, if you don't use approvals, you would do this from the new tab instead. In this case, I have two items that I want to put on a PO, both for the same vendor. So I'm going to select them and click Group into PO. Now this Group into PO action is only available if you have the lab admin permission in Quartzy. After clicking Group into PO, I'm brought to this new page. So this is our purchase order page, and it is specifically tailored to my Quartzy account and mapped to concepts from my own Quartzy NetSuite account. The way that works is we take all the fields that you would normally fill out on a NetSuite purchase order and put them in this Quartzy page in one way or another. So that means if you have a memo field, for example, at the top level of your PO, but it's optional, we can add it here and we don't need to make it a required field. Well, however, every PO needs to have a vendor, so that's why this is a required field. Now you'll also notice that most of these fields have already been pre-populated, and that's because we put significant effort into our auto-population mechanic here in Quartzy. Basically, we can pre-fill most fields that you manually fill out on a purchase order in NetSuite based on data that's already in Quartzy. For example, I'm logged in as Chris, so that's how it knows to select the Chris value here. We know that the vendor here is Agilent Technologies, so it pre-selected the NetSuite vendor of Agilent Technologies. Another example, we have a catalog number on every request, so that's pre-populated here. Now, in a lot of cases, this is so useful that we've had customers, when they go through this implementation, they'll add a catalog number field to NetSuite specifically because we can provide it automatically. Things like the name of the item, the quantity, and the price will all show up in NetSuite by default. Another example, we set up a rule here. Because I'm in my East Coast lab, they knew to select this Pine Brook location, but if I had been in the West Coast lab, it would have selected Hayward instead. So we have a lot of flexibility in our system to not only capture the data your NetSuite purchase orders need, but we can also pre-populate it in a way that should be faster than creating a purchase order in NetSuite directly. Now, before I send this to NetSuite, I'll point out we don't have a PO number, but what's going to happen is I'll submit it to NetSuite, it'll create a PO number and send it back to Quartzy. So I'll go ahead and do that now. All right, so the purchase order has been created successfully in NetSuite, and the PO number has been sent back to Quartzy. So one thing I'll show here really quickly is you can see that this PO number is automatically attached to the request in Quartzy to make it easier to find and receive these items in the future. Now I'll jump into NetSuite so we can check this purchase order just to show you what it looks like. And I think, as you would expect, it looks exactly like a PO that you would have made in NetSuite directly. So the vendor, the employee selection, these are there. The items, all of this data that was already in Quartzy has been used to create this PO automatically in NetSuite. So again, the whole goal of this project, of this feature, of these implementations, is to make creating purchase orders faster via the integration than it would be to go directly to NetSuite.
All right, so that was Chris's overview of syncing POs from Quartzy to NetSuite, and it looks like we did get a really good question from Rachel, so thank you for that. She asked, does this work for only Quartzy items? So that would be, items that you're going to order from Quartzy to be fulfilled by Quartzy, or does it work for all vendors? So both these integrations allow you, it works for all vendors. So you can see in the example here, we have just Agilent Technologies. This is a non-Quartzy item, and we were able to create that PO and sync it to our NetSuite account. So it is all vendors. All right, so now we'll move into how to integrate your account with QuickBooks Online as well as NetSuite. So we'll start here with QuickBooks. Luckily with QuickBooks, it's super easy and quick. You can do it in a couple minutes by any org admin. There's no coding required or anything like that. So I'll show you these steps here in a second. So first, again, you need to be an org admin to access this section called Manage Organization here. And once you get there, you'll see this Integrations tab, and then you'll see a QuickBooks Connect button here. You'll just click that, and then it'll ask you to select your company or your institution from this list. Then you'll click Next. Finally, you'll confirm that data, click Connect, and then you're done. And then you would go back to Quartzy. You would complete your configuration here, and then click Save Changes. And basically, that's all of the steps that you need to take to set up this QuickBooks Online integration. NetSuite, it's a little bit more involved. So we'll start out with scheduling a kickoff meeting between you and your lab, whoever would want to meet with us on this, and our implementations team, which is usually me and Chris. We'll go over your specific requirements and help you configure everything you need. To get started, you would just email your account executive, or you can email us directly at implementations@quartzy.com. And I've linked, for both of these, I've linked these overviews with step-by-step instructions as well. So basically the process for the NetSuite configuration, like I said in that kickoff call, we'll review your specific purchase order setup in your NetSuite account so that we can determine which fields need to be added to Quartzy, which values should be selectable for those fields. So for example, you might have, an employee list that's maybe 50 some odd employees, but you only need, 5 of those employees to be selectable. We can, configure that and customize that a lot. You don't have to put all those values. So we'll help you decide on which values should be selected, and then whether those fields should be required or optional. So we'll also help you identify those fields, the values, and then the internal IDs that you'll need to provide to us from your NetSuite account. And then we'll also walk you through the process of setting up this integration in NetSuite. So you basically have to create a role for Quartzy in the integration in NetSuite. And that will create some credentials that you share with us so that we can connect the accounts on our end. So once you've shared all that information and set the appropriate permissions and all of that, we'll activate the integration for testing. So the next step would be testing in your staging environment. We'll create a test lab for you, and then we'll send over test POs to sync from that test lab to your NetSuite sandbox. And so if everything looks good there and you've completed all the testing that you've wanted to complete, and then we've made any revisions that you might have asked for, we switch your account from staging to production, and then you're live. And then next question here is, are these integrations included in all subscription plans? So they actually are included in all of them except for the starter plan. But if you're on the starter plan, you can add on these. It's just going to be some kind of extra fee. You could talk to our sales team about that. And so I do have a link to our subscription plan pricing page here. But yeah, they are included in professional, enterprise, and nonprofit. And then, like I said, as an add-on to starter plan. All right, and Elizabeth, did we happen to get any other questions?
I don't see any others in the chat.
Awesome. Well, if you guys have questions, just throw them in now. And while we wait for anyone to have questions, if there are any improvements or changes that you would like to see now that you're a little bit more familiar with these integrations, let us know. Put your answers in the chat now, or as always, you can always email us at support@quartzy.com. We're always iterating based on customer feedback. So it's really, really valuable when you guys, write into us and say, oh, I wish it could work this way, or could you add this? We're always, integrating those into our features. And then finally, we'll wrap up here with our resources. Elizabeth will be sending all these resources out. But basically, we just have a QuickBooks Online NetSuite NetSuite integration. These are all of our user guides, overviews, and setup configuration guides. A link to our help center. So this is going to be all of our user guides, our recorded webinars, how-to videos, and stuff like that. Again, support@quartzy.com is always the best place to reach out to if you have any questions or concerns or feedback. And then again, our integrations webinar series registration. This is a link to register for the integration series, as well as any other of the webinar series that you'd like to attend. And that's it. And as always, if you have any questions, just let us know. Support@quartzy.com or implementations@quartzy.com.
Oh,
Katie, I think one more
yeah,
came
sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, late one. I have, just to clarify, this only works for POs for Quartzy distributor available items, or will it work for vendors that are in our NetSuite system?
Okay, yeah, we did answer that earlier. So it's
Oh,
going to
sorry.
be, oh, no worries. Yeah, it's going to be all
Oh, there's
vendors,
another one
that it works for.
I missed the other one. From vendors like Amazon, where the product's value is captured, but sometimes the sales and shipping costs are calculated at the end of the transactions. How would that be captured?
Sure,
So
I can. Oh, sorry,
yes,
Katie.
I was gonna turn it over to you, Chris. So go ahead.
That sounds good. Thank you. So generally speaking, I think it kind of varies between Quartzy or QuickBooks and NetSuite. Every implementation that our customers have done with NetSuite, the shipping is not included on the PO. Typically the purchase orders are written in such a way that it's exclusive of the shipping costs. There is a set for QuickBooks Online, however, there is a setting where you can sync across the cost of the shipping if you do know it ahead of time. So, if the workflow tends to be that I'm on, in Quartzy's cart, or maybe it's Sigma Aldrich's cart, EMD Millipore, any vendor that'll tell you what the shipping is. Users will start by putting the items in the cart, getting the total, including the shipping. And then when you're making the PO in Quartzy, if you enable the shipping setting, we will add a separate line to the PO for the shipping cost. That does assume that you know it ahead of time. If you don't have it when you place the PO, our integration basically takes information, sends it into QuickBooks Online, and then it can be added after the fact if you get invoiced and you want to put it on the PO or something like that. Hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if there's any further clarification needed.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Of course.
Right, yeah, and if there's no other questions,
Oh, hold on. Sorry. They're asking if we can run a quick demo of that, Chris.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let me
For
get pulled up here.
QuickBooks.
Yep.
pause my share here.
All right, let me get into my correct account. Can you see my Quartzy screen here?
Yes.
All right. So if you go into the settings where the integrations are managed, let me change this. So, all right, here we go. This is the setting. Do you want to include shipping and handling on purchase orders? Also, there's basically the same setting for tax. So if you select yes, this search identifies which item you want to associate these things with. So we'll save those. And basically, these are the line item types that it will use when we generate the purchase order. So now if let's see, ordered these items here. Actually, let's do this VWR. So we're going to group these two items, quantity and price, all of that is on there. In this case, VWR is our vendor, so we'll select them. Also, we just added a memo field. So this will show up on the memo QuickBooks. We just added this like a day or two ago, so that's exciting. Let's see, in these cases, we'll call these, I think I have general lab supplies. apply it. Okay. So we fill in our information. Now in this case, let's say there's $10 in tax and $20 in shipping. Again, this is assuming that I knew this information ahead of time. I'll sync this and give me one moment while I log into QuickBooks here. All right. So it looks like we've got the PO number from QuickBooks. Again, the way this works is it takes the line totals and then adds whatever you have for tax and shipping to get to the total value. So if we look this up in QuickBooks, here's our PO. Right off the bat, you can see the total matches. Sorry, there we go. Okay, and you can see here, the POs, it's created at the item level. Here's the 2 items that I ordered with the appropriate quantities and rates, and then tax and shipping come through as additional lines to get to the appropriate total on the PO. And these are connected, of course, to the GL accounts that I set up in QuickBooks beforehand. Does that answer the question? Okay, so we have a question here. Can we see an example of a PO that's created? How do you download a copy of the PO? Katie, up to you. If you want to take that one, or I can take it.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Grace.
Sure. All right. So in this case, there's kind of 2 different ways to do it. You can, from within QuickBooks, there is a way here, you can configure the PDF where you can download it here. Again, this is just their standard template. You notice here that these codes look kind of confusing. This is a setting that I have, but you can change it in Quartzy here. I'll show that really quick. Basically, it's set up that way to guarantee that it's always a unique value based on the catalog number, but you can change it to use just the catalog number or a generic name like lab supply or something like that if that works instead, works better for you. So again, this there we go. So you can download the PDF directly within QuickBooks Online. They have a template. I'm not sure how customizable it is. I haven't really gotten into it too much. But again, you can download it here if you need to print it or if you need to put a signature or other things on it. This is their standard template. And alternatively, from here you can send it to the vendor directly from QuickBooks based on how you've defined, the PO. Now, again, my vendor doesn't have an email because I didn't set it up that way, but typically when you set up your vendors in QuickBooks, you would have this. Now there is another option here within Quartzy. So if you select these items, and then there's this option here for create rec form. This feature was originally introduced for academic procurement departments, but we have lots of folks where if you have a PO template, you can give it to us. We'll customize the fields and the way that it populates, and then you can download a PDF directly here within Quartzy. And so this is if you have logos or headers or specific information that you want to have on all of your POs, you can download it directly here. I haven't done this one in quite a while. Let's see. So here's an example. Again, all of the information pulled directly from Quartzy can be put on here. And again, this is customized to your account and whatever you might want it to look like. So again, there's 2 ways to actually get the PO document if that's what you need. But honestly, for most of the really popular vendors in the industry today, I can take this information, I can take this PO, I can look up these 2 items on VWR's website and just check out with this PO number, and you may not actually need the document. So that depends on your accounting and procurement practices. It also depends on the vendor. Some vendors do still require an actual document to be submitted. But again, the 2 options would be create the document within Quartzy or take the one that's already in QuickBooks.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Mark did have another question if you want to answer this real quick here. He asked, basically if he only knows the shipping and taxes after he's already synced that
Sure.
PO to QuickBooks. Can he go back and resync that PO, or will he need to add the tax and shipping to QuickBooks manually?
That's a great question. The integration is essentially, we would say it's a one way. We take this information, we send it to QuickBooks, and then we don't push updates to QuickBooks, and QuickBooks doesn't push updates to us, just because there's quite a few complications in, what happens if they're out of sync and which one becomes the source of truth. And so in that specific case, if you wanted to add tax and shipping after the PO is created, it would be added directly into QuickBooks.
Got it. Thank you.
Good questions today.
Absolutely. All right. I don't see any other questions here. But if you guys do come up with any other questions, go ahead and email us at support@quartzy.com. It'll be me and Chris helping you out. So those will come straight to us. And yeah, join us at our next integration webinar. That's going to be Benchling and SciSpot, and it's on the 17th, Wednesday the 17th. Right, and thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks all. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.